3 years ago, I moved from my rural hometown to a bustling city in Southeast Asia to find work. Initially, I struggled to find a decent job and ended up working as a security guard at an apartment complex. After about a week on the job, I put on my uniform one evening and got ready for my shift. As I got out of the lift, I suddenly caught a whiff of burning paper. It was alarming to smell something like that in a tower block. I followed the smell and found its source. To my shock, an elderly woman was burning paper right by the lift doors in the lobby, flames licking the air. Strangely, despite the thick smoke, the smoke alarm hadn't gone off. "Ma'am, you can't burn paper here. It's dangerous," I shouted, rushing over to stop her. The old woman finished burning the paper and didn't pay any attention to me. She mumbled something in a heavy local dialect that I couldn't understand and then walked away without saying another word. "What about the mess you made?" I called after her, but she ignored me and kept walking. Left with no choice, I stomped out the remaining embers and cleaned up the ashes. Back at the security office, I vented my frustration to my colleague, Uncle Ding. To my surprise, he wasn't the least bit upset. "That old lady? No one can control her. Just leave her alone," he said with a shrug. Then Uncle Ding added something that struck me as odd. "Don't worry too much about the night shift. If things are quiet, just get some sleep." I took over the night shift and made my rounds. The building was eerily quiet, so I settled down to watch a film to pass the time. As the night wore on, I began to feel sleepy and eventually dozed off at my desk. Suddenly, I was jolted awake by the blaring alarm on one of the monitors. It was the lift camera. Someone was trapped inside. "Help! Get us out of here!" A man's frantic voice came over the emergency intercom. "Stay calm. I'm on my way," I reassured him as I activated the emergency controls and rushed to the lift. When I opened the doors, the power was out and it was pitch black. "Don't be afraid, I'm here," I shouted. The middle-aged man inside stumbled out, visibly shaken. Thank you," he shouted. "Come on up. Where's the child?" I asked, remembering that I'd seen a child with him on the monitor. "What child?" The man looked at me in confusion. "It was just me in there." I was stunned. I could have sworn I'd seen a child with him. As the man hurried away, I shone my torch into the lift, but it was empty. On my way back to the office, I heard the sound of a football being kicked. I turned to see a ball rolling towards me, followed by a young boy. "Hey kid, what are you doing here so late?" I asked, thinking he must have snuck out to play. The boy didn't answer and instead went around the corner. Determined to get him back to his flat, I ran after him, but every time I thought I had him, he disappeared around another corner. Finally, he slipped through a door. I followed him, only to find myself back in the broken lift shaft. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. I had been running in circles. My heart pounded as I shone my torch down the shaft, but the boy was nowhere to be seen. Terrified, I sprinted back to the office and stayed there until the end of my shift. The next day, Uncle Ding told me the tragic story of a child who had died in that lift years before. It explained why the old woman was burning paper in the lobby and why everyone seemed to ignore her actions. I quit my job a few months later and never went back to that building. And that ends today's story. Dark whispers, shadows filled with fear. Is it the unknown at play or the darkness within human nature? Hello, dear listeners. Today we delve into the eerie practice of raising ghosts. Join me as we explore this chilling tale. The practice of raising ghosts is most common in the Southeast Asian region, particularly in Siam. The art of raising ghosts in Siam originates from the southwestern parts of China, such as Yunnan and Sichuan, and blends with local traditions. Our story is a tale of using dark magic to harm others, only to suffer dire consequences yourself. Good and evil exist side by side in this world. As the saying goes, evil cannot triumph over good. There is divine retribution for all. Throughout history, people have resorted to various forms of dark arts to harm others for temporary gain, forgetting that everything in this world is bound by karma. Those who use dark arts to harm others will inevitably face severe repercussions. In the 1960s, during a severe famine, many people were struggling to find food. The mountain village of Ban Khum was particularly impoverished. Only Zhang Dajiang's family was relatively well off. When he saw the villagers starving, Zhang Dajiang, a kind-hearted man, couldn't stand it any longer. He talked to his wife about distributing their surplus grain to help the villagers. His wife, also a compassionate person, agreed. The next day, Zhang Dajiang approached the village chief, who was moved to tears by his generosity. The village chief went from house to house, telling everyone to gather at Zhang Dajiang's house to eat. Zhang Dajiang distributed grain to the villagers. Despite his wealth, he couldn't feed the whole village. After distributing the surplus grain, about 20 families remained without food. These families, understanding Zhang Dajiang's good intentions, refrained from making a fuss. This act of kindness eased the village's food crisis. However, a scoundrel named Wang Gi set his eyes on Zhang Dajiang's wealth. Wang Gi, a troublemaker who was supposed to call Zhang Dajiang uncle, saw the distribution and assumed that Zhang Dajiang still had plenty of wealth. That night, he sneaked into Zhang Dajiang's house and rummaged through the side room. A noise woke Zhang Dajiang. He rushed into the next room and caught Wang Gi in the act. A struggle ensued, and the commotion woke up the neighbors. They rushed over and helped Zhang Dajiang restrain Wang Gi. When they recognized him, the neighbors cursed Wang Gi. Taking them by surprise, Wang Gi fled and wasn't seen again for 5 years. 5 days later, the villagers still hadn't seen Wang Gi. His family claimed he had gone to work, and the villagers paid little attention. 4 years after the famine ended, the village began to prosper. Zhang Dajiang's family, probably because of their good deeds, also became wealthier. One day, Wang Gi returned. The villagers, having forgotten the incident, greeted him and joked about his wealth. Wang Gi smiled and left, hiding a sinister grin. He went to the outskirts of the village and watched the graveyard for hours before returning home. That night, he returned with a sack and performed rituals at each grave until dawn. Wang Gi had learned geomancy during his 5 years away, and he tampered with Zhang Dajiang's family graves, disturbing their feng shui. Zhang Dajiang's family then suffered a series of tragedies. His wife died of lung cancer and a son drowned. The misfortune continued with his grandchildren. One was born disabled and another died in a car accident. The family's wealth rapidly declined. Zhang Dajiang's eldest son, remembering the family's misfortunes, consulted a feng shui master. The master revealed the tampering and said, "Whoever did this is truly vile and intends to harm your family for generations." Angry but unable to identify the culprit, the family could only correct the graves as advised. Meanwhile, Wang Gi's family faced their own tragedy. During a festive meal, a gas explosion destroyed their home, killing all but 2 of their granddaughters. Indeed, what goes around comes around. Karma spares no one and retribution comes in due time. Dear listeners, that concludes today's story. Thank you for listening.